Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Check-In Podcast. Over the past few weeks, I've been lucky enough to get the chance to speak to a number of travel advisors from all corners of North America, all with different business models and different experience levels. There's been a lot of different threads of those conversations, but there really has been one commonality that so many of these conversations have shared, and that's that all of these travel advisors, no matter how experienced or inexperienced, no matter where they're located in a city or out in the country, all of these advisors are dealing with one of the biggest boom times for advisors in recent memories. Clients and bookings and consumer demand all exploding despite obstacles that still very much exist for the consumer. I had one advisor who I've known for a while in particular tell me that she has seen nothing like what she's experienced now through her decades in the industry. Words that I really couldn't have imagined coming from an industry luminary just a few years ago. It's really been one of the more special times I've experienced in the travel industry, and it's been very well deserved for all stakeholders, especially after the last few years we've had. My guest today is Joshua Bush of Ave Two Travel, who joined me to talk about the state of the business right now. Josh was one of the voices in the industry who I really think has the pulse of the luxury segment in particular. And I wanted to hear about how demand is impacting Ave Two's advisors, what destinations are gaining market share, how the low supply and high demand is impacting bookings, and how long he expects this quote unquote golden age of travel to really last. As part of the conversation, I was also fortunate enough to be able to hear a little bit about Ave Two's history, in particular how Joshua's family built the agency, then eventually successfully pitched him a career move from consumer finance to travel. We spoke about the legacy he's really tasked with carrying on now, and why Ave Two has not only leaned into, but has taken a leadership role in the industry when it comes to social and environmental responsibility. Ave Two has already passed the assessment phase of B Corp certification, and as you'll hear in the conversation, is well on its way to becoming the first official B Corp certified travel agency. I really love getting the chance to talk to Josh, no matter how brief or lengthy. He's one of the most insightful people in the industry and someone I know others look to for leadership and commentary. So it was really a privilege to have him on. I hope you all enjoy the conversation as much as I did. So let's check in with Josh.
Morning, Dan.
Morning, Josh. How's it going?
It's going well. How are you?
I'm good. A little rainy here, but you really can't complain, to be honest.
Yeah. It's that's kind of the weather these days, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. We didn't have that bad of a winter here in New York, which I'm sure you experienced the same in Philly.
Yeah.
So I think we've been pretty fortunate, but I guess you never know what's going to come in like March or April. Like things could really take a turn for the worse pretty quickly.
Yeah. What is it in like a lion out like a lamb type of thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, thanks for taking the time to
Well,
talk to
thank
me.
you. I always appreciate coming and sitting down and chatting with you.
Yeah, I know how busy things are for advisors now. The conversations I've had over the past month or so, it's just like people are like dumbfounded about how busy they are, how much business they're getting. So I always appreciate people sort of lending me some of their time, which I know could be used for other things.
No, I'm absolutely happy to. Just jump on a call at any time
Yeah.
and chat. I mean, this is what we do, so I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I wanted to start off and asking you about how things are going now, because I know we spoke a couple times over the last year. I was at your collective last year, and I know things were looking pretty optimistic then, but I had a couple conversations yesterday, and one travel advisor who's been in the business for a long while said she's never seen anything like sort of what's going on right now with consumer demand for travel and with the volume that's going on, not just with her, but with new ICs. Like it seems incredibly optimistic for everyone right now.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Dan. The future for the travel industry remains bright. The demand that we are seeing from consumers is like no other that I have seen in the 20 years that I've been involved in the industry. And I think that there's a number of reasons for that. And the first of which is we're still in this post-pandemic wave of high demand. And in many cases, it has to do with scarcity and lack of availability of specific properties. So one of the trends that we're seeing that I've talked a lot about have been clients who come to us and let's say they haven't traveled in a little while, or they even have been traveling throughout the pandemic, and they want Italy this summer, and it's like, I'm sorry, the Amalfi Coast is sold out. But one of the things that they will say is, well, when is it next available, and when does that availability coincide with my own availability? Let's go ahead and book that now and get that on the books. But now I need someplace to go in the meantime. Yeah. So in the past, where we might have had, one or two big trips booked for clients, now we're seeing 3, 4, maybe even 5 trips booked for big clients. Compounding that has been that, you think about that early adoption curve of people that go and get that new iPhone every year. Well, those have been our intrepid travelers throughout the pandemic. Now we're at the very tail end of that adoption curve of people that were regular travelers in 2018, 2019, but they've been sitting on the sidelines, and now they're ready to start traveling again themselves. They've got the confidence to venture back out in the world, and it's an entirely different marketplace. So one of the things that also creates a headwind for our travelers is some of these customers that are coming and saying, what do you mean this is $2,000 a night? In 2017, it was only $800 a night, that sort of thing. So that demand of again, having lack of availability in a lot of the top places that we have had in the past has made things a little bit difficult. Yeah. One of the other big challenges is that we're seeing that it's taking 4 or 5 times as long to do the same simple task today as it did in 2019. And a lot of that has to do with staffing issues with some of our suppliers. Like, not everybody is 100% back. And while they might have staffed up and put people in those roles that were once not there, it takes a long time for people to get up to speed, like to gel as a team. Even those staff members are they're just not confident. They're not where they need to be. But I think one of the most frustrating things that I hear from my advisors is that they're on hold, and they're on hold to do something simple like a final payment, or that they need to add insurance to a booking or something along those lines. And when there's so much volume that's coming in and there's so much business to be had, to be able to not get back to our customers because we're trying to do simple things that could have either been done, online with just a simple payment form or what have you. It's trying to talk to a person and not having that availability.
Yeah, and I think since the pandemic rebound, not even the rebound, but just the reopening, the staffing issue has come up constantly, and I don't know what's going to solve that. But I wanted to ask you, you mentioned the Amalfi Coast as one of these destinations, and I've heard that about Italy and France and things like that. But where else are people considering going when they can't get that booking for a summer trip and they still want to travel? I mean, are there any destinations now that are sort of gaining more consumer interest because of this lack of availability?
Yeah, I mean, our usual suspects are still our top travel destinations: Italy, France, UK. But what has kind of been interesting, particularly in the European sphere, we're seeing a lot more Spain, we're seeing a lot more Portugal, and definitely Greece is back in the mix. One of the latecomers to the game, and I think it was because it just took them a little while to open, is definitely Japan. Japan is back. I know many people are frustrated because it's not just hotel availability, but now it's guide availability. And a lot of our top DMC partners, rightfully so, are very concerned about the quality of their product and also the quality of their response time. So many of them have shut down operations for specific months of the summer where they're like, we know all of our top guides are sold out. So rather than go and try to source somebody else that would be not as quality of a product that we're used to, we're just going to say we're sorry, we're full. We'll take reservations at a later time. One of the other areas that is really popular right now that we have seen is Africa. Southern Africa, East Africa is definitely back in the full mix. And yet there's still this love with the American backyard. It's definitely slowed and cooled quite a bit because it was the only place that was open in 2020, 2021. But that I think that we were so enamored with everywhere else other than just domestic, that now we do feel that we can travel domestically and that there's a value to be had there. And so that is getting interwoven with some of these other really exotic, bigger ticket trips that people are still enjoying, whether it's the national parks, whether it's Florida, whether it's California, Caribbean, Mexico, and even Canada.
Yeah, I've heard the same about Japan and Portugal too. Seems to be the destinations coming out of a lot of advisors' mouth. Portugal too, in particular, seems to. I imagine even pre-pandemic, it was sort of trending to become one of these staple destinations, and it does seem like it's definitely become that kind of place that Americans are considering traveling to.
Yeah, I mean, fabulous food. It's got pretty good lift, and amazing resorts, and it's kind of, I think, in the natural progression of people have gone, how they have gone through and traveled Europe.
So I know you don't have a crystal ball, but I mean, what do you have any expectations of how long this kind of demand is going to last? I mean, you mentioned supply. I imagine that's part of it when the travel companies can boost supply, whether they will or won't.
No, I mean, I think as far as the crystal ball, how long is this going to last? We're going to ride this wave as long as we could. I mean, we were definitely down for the count for a little over 2 years.
Yeah.
But at this point in time, I think if I look at what we have on the books going into 24, even, we have a strong 18 months, possibly 24, before we're able to really kind of reevaluate. And this is all coming despite talks of recession, global upheaval and unrest. The R word and inflation does not seem to be slowing our consumers down. Many of them did very, very well throughout the pandemic, particularly in that luxury sector. And now they know there's a number of things that are pushing us forward. And I think that despite economic headwinds, what we have going for us is that people can work from anywhere now. That you have the ability to go ahead and travel and still kind of work, not necessarily work from home. There's no reason to have that fake Zoom background anymore. You could have that real Zoom background. And that combined with just the desire to get back out and not have that captivity anymore, is still really driving people to move forward.
Yeah, it is interesting because the talk of recession has come up several times in 2020, early 2022. I remember having conversations with tour operators about it too, because at a certain point the financial media made it seem like it wasn't a question of if, it was a question of when, and that question has changed, I think, a number of times over the past 15 months or so. No advisor, no travel company I speak to are seeing any signs of recession, and it's interesting you aren't seeing it either.
Yeah, I mean, there's the idea of slowdown isn't happening. I think the one thing that could be X factor would be some sort of military action. If things continue in Asia and in China, if things expand in Europe, that could definitely put a damper on things. But as far as consumer confidence, as far as people wanting to really move forward with making large scale purchases, the amount of six-figure trips that are being booked today just really kind of blows my mind, and we're excited. I mean, quite frankly, we deserve it after what we've been through.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, we are not seeing consumer confidence slow down. And the other thing that I would say is that as geopolitical things shift, so does the consumer. So that it hasn't put a total damper on traveling. It might be a damper just to particular destinations.
Yeah. So the six-figure trips, I imagine consumer expectations have gone up along with the price point. Are they expecting different things from travel advisors now, or are they expecting different kind of service that they're paying this kind of premium to travel?
Well, at least from selfishly from our standpoint, we've always been delivering, I think, that top dollar service. But I think that the patience is wearing a little thin on the argument of service at hotels. Yes, they've had a chance to dig themselves out of some really bad years with very high ADRs. I don't think that we're going to see, or they'll be able to sustain the ADR growth that they once had. One of the things that I'm hearing, again, while I said before that consumers have fallen in love with their backyard, they still have a whole lot of other choices to go to. So they are maybe they're still continuing to go, but not with the fervor that they once were previously. And so if anything, I'm hearing, domestically, Caribbean, Mexico, of wait, we don't have the same level of occupancy that we did a couple of years ago, so they won't be able to have the same rate growth. What is a challenge, though, is for that consumer to be able to get that level of service internationally that they're expecting at that price point that they are now paying. There are a number of places that have not completely caught up to the rate that they're charging.
Yeah.
And I think that is going to, there's going to be an inequity between what people are paying and the value that they're getting. And so those hotels that can really catch up and, make sure that their service is stellar are going to be the ones that are going to solidify relationships for life, so that clients come back time and time again.
Yeah. It's interesting. I a lot of the talk the past month has also been about the supply being so low for travel, but then we have the Chinese consumer eventually coming back in the marketplace is going to add an incredible amount of travelers. So I really wonder what the ecosystem is going to look like in maybe 6 months' time. I mean, will we be talking about recession still? Will we be talking about supply and demand still? Will things have changed completely? So I think it's going to be an interesting sort of little ride here for the travel industry going forward.
Yeah, very much so. I if you find somebody in your talks that has that crystal ball, I would love to tune into that episode. That's going to be a good one.
All right, I'll make a note of that. Yeah, so Josh, I was lucky enough to attend your collective last year and get an introduction to Avenue Two through the conversations I've had with you and your advisors. I know you sort of have an interesting story because you're Avenue Two is one of the mainly family businesses that sort of have blossomed in the travel industry. I was hoping you could tell me a little bit about what you remember when your parents started the business. I have the year down somewhere, but I mean, you obviously know better than I do. Yeah, I mean, do you remember what the sort of discussion was like? What industry did they come into? Did they come from? And what are your sort of memories of that time?
Right out of college, and when my parents were first married, they traveled a lot. So they were going to Europe and a number of other places. And so we always kind of joke amongst the family that my dad had the real job, so to speak. Okay. And was, back in the 70s and 80s was kind of the main breadwinner, where my mom was sought out by family and friends because of her travels and her knowledge, and was, well, Debbie, Paris, can you help plan our trip? And so she would literally roll maps out on the living room floor and start to build and craft itineraries for people. And it was kind of at that time where organically she evolved into being a de facto travel agent at that point in time, and went to work for the local town travel agency serving the local community, because that was the only way that you could get travel back then. Fast forward a few years, mom was so passionate about it that she and dad joked about actually buying the agency, and they approached the owner, and he said, yeah, sure. So they bought, at that point in time, Park Ave Travel, that was located on Park Avenue in downtown Swarthmore, Pennsylvania, right next to Swarthmore College. Okay. And at that time, I think I was maybe 7 or 8, and so child labor laws, I think, were a little different back then. Yeah. And so I was quickly put to work stamping brochures and separating ticket stock with all the red carbon on it and all that other types of fun stuff. So I grew up kind of on a rollaway, traveling a lot, seeing lots of different amazing hotels, and travel was a value that was instilled in me at a very young age. But I didn't necessarily know that it was going to be my career or what I necessarily wanted to do with my life. So after college, I went off to work in consumer finance, and worked for a large credit company for a number of years, and kind of figured out my own path in the Fortune 500 world, while at the same time Park Ave Travel had then joined API, the precursor to Virtuoso, and really started to focus on, during commission cuts and the rise of the OTA, on that high-level custom FIT type of book of business. So now it's about African safaris, it's about Machu Picchu in Peru, and just really intricate things of really getting to know the customer and putting together a fabulous trip for them.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, while I was out on my own, the trips that they were now taking were far more elaborate and luxurious than I remember growing up. And yet, as I said, there was kind of a part of me that was missing, because since I had grown up traveling, it was something that was important to me. And now the trips that I were taking were to Corpus Christi, Texas. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's to, manage an office as opposed to really being there for a leisure destination. And so it was actually staff at Virtuoso that had convinced my dad on the Hiram Bingham train at a Virtuoso chairman's event to come and speak to me about joining the business. I'm an only child, so they needed to try to figure out what that succession plan looked like. So in May, Memorial Day weekend in 2006, went to my parents' vacation home in the Blue Ridge Mountains just outside of Charlottesville, and they ambushed me with photo albums of some of their most recent safaris and other trips and things, and had said, have you ever thought about, getting involved with the business? We would love to try to work together. So we kind of came up with this amazing plan. 3-day weekend turned into a business planning session with flip charts and a whole bunch of other things to try to see could we make this business work. But at that point in time, I was still rather young and naive and in my 20s. And again, this was at a time where it's all about Expedia and Travelocity, and I didn't really I was trying to grasp with where do I fit into this, and do we really, can a travel agency really succeed in this online marketplace? And it wasn't until August of that year, at the equivalent of Virtuoso Week, where I'm sharing a table with my mom, and general manager after general manager and sales director after sales director comes through and is, oh, Debbie, is this the son that I've heard about? It's so great to see you. Thank you for sending us this clients. And I got it, because it's about the relationship. And the other thing that went off in my head was, my mom's a rock star. This is real. This is actually how this business gets done. And that was the thing that I think was just really important and a telltale for me, that we could scale this, we could grow this. And it doesn't matter whether at that point in time it was a website that would be able to take bookings, or we fast forward to today where we're talking about, chat GPT. Like, we're still going to need that human connection to be able to make sure that we're pulling off absolutely amazing trips. And so that's kind of when the light bulb went off, that we could scale this, we could make this work. At that point in time, we had, including myself and my mom, there were 4 people in the office. And today we're a little shy of 200.
Yeah.
So we've had a great trajectory and a great foundation on which to build a fantastic host agency.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, because again, there's so many people who've helped build or built these incredible family businesses, but I mean, is there ever an aversion to taking on a business that your parents have built? One, because it might not seem cool because you've seen your parents do it your whole life growing up, and 2, because it does seem to add an amount of pressure, like personal pressure to you, when you're taking over this kind of business that you've seen built by people who've also raised you. Like, I imagine there's like 2 things going on when you're trying to make these kind of decisions, especially because you were successful. You had a career prior to joining travel.
Yeah, very, very much so. I mean, working in a family business presents its own challenges and hurdles. And I think one of the things that we were very fortunate for a number of things, actually. The first and foremost is that there were so many amazing family businesses that had come before us in this industry. So being able to have mentors like Valerie, Jennifer, and Kimberly, the Wilsons were fabulous role models. And I just remember having almost an open door policy with Valerie, where she would say, whatever you all need in with your 3-person family to try to move forward in this business, we've probably already gone through some of those problems, and so more than happy to share that. And I've got a great relationship with Jennifer Wilson as a result of that, where we've got great moms who've been very, very successful, and yet we also have our own personalities of things that we want to do and how do we do it. But I think one of the things that we also recognized early on is that while we're very passionate about the business, we all want to get to the same destination. We just might have different thoughts and ideas about how to get there. And once we kind of just figured out that it's the destination is the same, that became a little bit easier. And then once we figured out what our strengths were, and stayed in each other's lanes, is when, you know, conflict wouldn't occur. And again, it's a lot easier to have conflict with a loved one because you know that they're pretty much going to always be there.
Yeah.
So that friction does occur from time to time. It was something that we were able to surmount and move past. And then the other thing I have to, you know, be able to do is just give the utmost respect to my parents, because they tested me. And you know, I think that we could have gotten to where we are maybe a little bit faster, but I had to prove myself. We had to grow. We had to prove the concept, and we had to do it in a financially conservative way. And so while I started in 2006, I really didn't become in charge and didn't take the reins until 2012. And at that point, we really had defined roles of what we were going to do, how we were going to be able to do it. And you know, they've been fantastic in saying, let's double down on this and see where we can take this business.
Does that kind of history you share with a lot of people, and going back, seeing what your parents built, does that give you or force you to take a higher stake in the industry in general? Like I've seen you at Ascent Day last year. I saw you hosting, filling in to host the advocacy in there too. I mean, do you feel like you have a stake and you have a responsibility in the industry because of the history you have?
I think it's not just how do we preserve a legacy, but when I say it's in your blood, I mean it's literally in the blood. And so this is, again, like I said, travel was a value that was instilled in me at a very young age. And because I've had so many opportunities to see the world, I see what it does to change people for the better. And I think that that's the reason why I want to stay in this industry, and why I want to promote to bring on as many independent contractors as possible, to you know, have them, you know, speak to individual travelers so that they can see that we're all people all over the world. They become, you know, open to new ideas and new thoughts, and become more tolerant and better global citizens. And so that was, again, something that was instilled in me from childhood. And so that's the legacy, and that's, I think, the burden, if you would, a good burden, to be as involved with this industry and make sure that it succeeds and make sure that it continues to grow and thrive. And I think that comes out in the way that we work with our independent contractors and our affiliates, and where we're trying to take the business, and how we want to just kind of continue to be good partners and good stewards, not just to the planet, but to our partner suppliers, that we want to be a joy to work with. And that's the best thing that we can do, is just add, to elevate our industry to new heights and new levels, and create trust within the consumer marketplace.
Yeah, and I know last year during your collective, you spoke about that Ave Two was well on its way to becoming the first B Corp certified travel agency. Is there an update? Do you have an update on this? I mean, what's this?
So everybody in the world wants to be B Corp right now, and so you've got this fantastic organization that does third-party verification. And they've been inundated with applications. So where we thought that this might take a year, we see that's going to take a little bit longer. But we're currently in the verification stage, so we're moving along, which is great.
Okay.
But now they're doing all the due diligence, and this is really kind of a lot of the hard work. So of the questionnaires that we've answered, now they're asking for all of the backup for that. So we're in that process right now, and so hopefully by the end of the year, or maybe early into next year, we'll have gotten through that. But it's still all green lights. And so super excited to continue to move forward on that. But they're going through our books, they're going through our HR manuals. To say that this is an audit, it's rather daunting, but we know that the reward is going to be worth it on the other side. And very, at the very least, you know, Dan, we haven't had a chance to talk about this, but when we started that whole process, you get kind of like a benchmark score, and you have to have at least 80 in order to really submit. And I think we were in the mid 60s. but just going through that effort of seeing what are the things that they're asking for. Are you paying not just minimum wage, but are you paying a living wage? Are you, how do you, not just greenhouse gases and your scope 1, 2, 3 and emissions, but what are you doing with your computers? How are you recycling them? Where do you have any philanthropic activities, and what percentage of profit goes back into the community? So many different things that were very easy check boxes that maybe we were already doing or we were on the cusp of doing. And so if we just tweaked our behavior just a little bit, that would move us in the right direction. And one of the things that impresses me about the sustainability efforts of Virtuoso and what Matthew and Jessica Upchurch keep talking about are, how do we make small incremental changes to better ourselves? And if everybody kind of took that B Corp assessment, and whether they applied or not, but they just changed one or two things because of the awareness that assessment now brought, we would be in a much better position than we are today as a stronger industry. And so I think that's one of the biggest takeaways is that we can continue to make these little small Kaizen type of changes and all be better because of it.
Yeah, it is nice. The last three conversations I've had for this series, they've all landed on sustainability, whether or not we planned it ahead of time or not. But I guess, I mean, what would you say to someone who's playing devil's advocate for these kind of conversations? And obviously, it's taken a lot of time to do this. It's probably taken a lot of other resources as well. For the agencies or the groups who maybe haven't considered this, they don't want to invest that kind of time or those kind of resources. I mean, what would you say to them?
Well, I love that devil's advocate comment, because what spurred this whole thing for me was I have the chance to sit on a number of different advisory boards and have great presentations from supplier partners about their sustainability initiatives and efforts. And usually we would get to that point of the meeting and that presentation, and then we would go around the room and say, okay, well, what do you all think? And the comment that I heard time and time again was, well, our clients, that's wonderful that you're doing that, but our clients aren't asking for this. So it's not that really that big of a deal for me, but you keep doing what you're doing, and that's good for you. And I just, after hearing that so many times, I just kind of scratched my head and I said, wait a minute, this isn't a supplier problem. This has got to be an agency problem as well. And so what are the things that we're going to do in order to try to move that ball forward and truly have that partnership? And so for those that don't have, it's not about money. I mean, it can be, but it's about a mindset of, well, what if I just ask my supplier partners different questions? What if when I'm meeting with that GM or that director of sales for a hotel of, what are you doing with your food waste each day? What is your hiring strategy? Do you have a plan for keeping, the money and the profit that you have in the local community? Those questions are not being asked in every single presentation right now when we have a chance to meet with suppliers. And so sometimes those suppliers don't have an answer. But I would challenge you that if I ask and you ask and three other people ask, not only are they going to have an answer, but they're going to start to take that into consideration when they're doing their plannings and their efforts. Yeah. So again, it kind of goes back to that. It's not nobody can do anything wrong in this. This is not a shame and a blame thing. This is definitely an awareness thing. And so the more that we bring that awareness around the issues that are there and start to have non-political, non-judgmental conversations, then we'll all start moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I agree. And you make it sound simple. I know that conversation bit's going to be a difficult thing for a lot of people, but yeah, I completely agree. I know we're running out of time. I wanted to ask you one more question, just because of where you sit in the travel industry and your experience. We spoke about sort of the crystal ball, but I mean, do you see any other sort of roadblocks for this continued success the travel trade is having, and anything in the future that people should keep an eye on, or should be aware of, or should be anticipating?
I've always said that, at this level in the industry where we're talking about the true professionals that we have out there, our biggest competition isn't another travel agency. It might not be a credit card company or even an OTA. It's the fact that, the general public doesn't know that we exist. Like if you watch television today, like the travel agents, they went the way of the dinosaur. We're still kind of the butt of some of the jokes that are out there. And so when this resonates so much with some of the questions that you previously asked me of stewardship of the industry, and why am I so passionate about it, and how do we continue to raise the professionalism? That is critical because the consumer needs to have trust in us. And what I have seen is that when the majority of business for our team comes as a referral, right? And that person comes in and they're going to have a million questions. They're going to question every single thing that our advisor recommends, until they actually go on that trip and experience it. And then they realize it was really good. Then they come back a second time. Maybe they have half as many or a quarter of the questions previously. And then finally by the third trip, it's, well, Dan, you know what I like. Just go ahead and book it. Yeah. I don't know that we necessarily need that headwind in the industry. And so how do we continue to educate ourselves? How do we continue to create that professional development? And so I applaud the top host agencies that are out there that have these onboarding training programs to really train advisors to do it right. It's those that just because they have access to a booking engine, maybe do us necessarily a disservice. And so my challenge would be to people who want to get into this industry is to take the time, do it right, really educate yourself, because there's so much nuance to being able to do and plan trips effectively and correctly. And the last thing that we want to do is have somebody who has a bad experience and then just kind of tarnishes the reputation of the rest of the industry. And there's so many great resources that are out there between, Facebook groups and chat groups where somebody who's new can very easily plug into somebody who's, 10, 20, 30 years of experience. And that's the thing that I've found about this industry that is no other, is the freedom and the willingness to share our expertise and to help lift up others around us. And so that's where I'm excited about our industry, where we're going. And the problem is, how do we create legitimacy? Well, we just need to look inside, and everybody's willing to share to lift us up.
Yeah, well, I know we went a little over our time, but it really is always incredibly insightful speaking to you. And I really, again, I know time is scarce these days, so I really appreciate you giving me the time.
Well, I love chatting with you. So,
Yeah.
let me know. Always available. Appreciate your time this morning.
All right. Well, hopefully I'll see you in person soon. And until then, I guess just take care, and hopefully we'll talk soon.
Will do. Thanks,
All right,
Dan.
thanks.
Bye.